A young man named Rio was told that his skill was cheat code management. Upon hearing this, the people were baffled because no one had ever heard of such a skill, so they mocked it as useless, which led to Rio being banished from his house. In their world, everyone awakens to a unique skill on their 18th birthday, such as the Sword Saint or Sage skill, and this is a moment filled with both excitement and anxiety. Just like that, Rio was also turning 18 today, so his father named Leon called him excitedly for the occasion. He then assured Rio that there was no doubt he would receive a high-ranking skill. With that being said, he asked Rio to not fret, to which Rio agreed. Their Manga family has actually produced generations of Sword Saints, many of whom serve as royal guards. As a result, Rio had undergone strict training from a young age in preparation for receiving a powerful skill. Moreover, his father was confident that he would continue the family legacy as a great swordsman, and this is what his father's been drilling into him. When they arrived for the skill ceremony, Rio drew immediate attention. His father was a famed sword saint, so the crowd cheered him on and expected great things. With that, Leon also urged him to brace himself for the big moment. However, when Rio's skill was revealed, the crowd fell silent. Leon immediately demanded to know what skill his son had received, so the bishop asked Rio to activate it, and when he did, a list of cheat codes appeared, but there was only one, and it was just a simple, small attack boost. Still, Rio informed his father about this. Upon hearing this, the crowd began calling Rio's skill useless, and some even sneered that no family would ever want to marry into the Manga family now. Hence, Rio stood there all stunned because just the day before, he had been confidently dedicating his life to becoming a sword saint. There were moments when he felt like giving up, but he always pushed through and believed in a bright future. Now he wondered if all his efforts had been in vain. Before he could dwell on it further, the bishop urged him to step aside for the next person. Reluctantly, Rio moved away, but suddenly the bishop shouted in surprise. He declared that the next boy had received the Silvery Sword Saint skill, which is a title that sounded even more prestigious than a sword saint. So the crowd buzzed with excitement, and the bishop encouraged the boy to pursue the path of the sword while promising him a bright future. Though Rio was confused by this, he still tried not to fall apart, and he even attempted to tell his father how amazing it was that the boy had become a sword saint. However, Leon had already approached the boy named Dudley, praising him as the Silvery Sword Saint, and even suggesting that he might surpass him one day. Leon even went so far as to invite Dudley to their home, which left Rio bewildered. So he called out to his father, but Leon only questioned why Rio was still standing there. With a cold expression, Leon declared that Rio had no right to be his son, while calling his skill useless and insisting that Rio was never truly his son to begin with. Still reeling from the shock, Rio heard his father add that at best, he could serve as Dudley's sparring partner and do household chores from now on. But as Rio struggled to comprehend the cruelty of the situation, Leon continued to criticize his attitude and telling him he could leave if he couldn't accept it. After being banished from the Manga household, Rio said a final goodbye to his parents even though they didn't even see him off. Now he realized that without his parents' influence, he was nothing and he had only been flattered by the title of being a Sword Saint's son. Also, the news that the Sword Saint's son had received a useless skill spread like wildfire, leaving Rio with nowhere to go. With no other options, he decided to head to the next town. As he made his way along the road, Rio encountered a pack of wild red wolves, which seemed strange since the road was lined with protective wards. Suddenly, he heard someone screaming no. So without hesitation, Rio rushed toward the source of the cry. Upon arriving, Rio immediately saw a black grizzly standing menacingly before a young girl. After recognizing her as Princess Rhaenyra, he urgently tells her to run to him, but her legs were unable to move, which sent Rio into a panic. Just then, his skill board revealed a new ability, which is an ability to use all fire magic upon victory in battle. Though he was surprised, he didn't waste time questioning it and began to remember instead the ultimate magic used among wizards. Knowing this, he then cast Prominence Lancer on the grizzly, and he quickly defeated it. Upon witnessing this, he began to marvel at how he could wield a spell he had never learned. But it was clear that this was the work of his supposedly useless skill, which is the cheat code management. Yet he couldn't shake the strangeness of it all, since if the skill only boosted attack power, it would have a specific skill like increase offensive ability. But since no one else had heard of cheat code management, he wondered just what this skill truly was. However, his thoughts were interrupted by Rhaenyra's gaze, so he immediately greeted her. As he helped her to her feet, Rhaenyra reminded him to call her Rey when they were alone and to skip the formal speech despite her status as the second princess. In response, he promised to drop the formalities. Rio had actually met Ray when his father brought him along as a Sword Saint candidate, since the Macba family had guarded the royals for generations. Being the same age, they got along well, where Ray even asked him to get married once they grew up, and they also often got into trouble together. So he guessed she had snuck out this time for some distraction. With that being said, he then tells her that there's something he wants to tell her. He then revealed that he hadn't become a Sword Saint, so he could no longer serve as her bodyguard. In fact, he'd already left the Macba household and saw no reason to stay connected to the royals. However, Ray refused to abandon him and even denounced the kingdom for discarding people over perceived lack of skill. With that, she declared that she'd go with him, but he quickly reminded her that he'd be arrested for kidnapping the princess. In response, Ray assured him that she had already left a letter behind, but Rio was still puzzled and asked why she was following him in the first place. Without hesitation, Ray declared that she simply wanted to go with him. Reluctantly, Rio allowed her to stay for only a short while. After that, she promised that he could rely on her in combat once her skill improved, and this reminded him that she is a holy mage that could indeed be helpful. Suddenly, Rio stopped to retrieve a stone from the grizzly's remains. Seeing this, Ray suggested he sell it in Lastral village, and mentioned that her mother's hometown was there. Ray was actually the illegitimate child of the king and a woman from Lastral, which placed her lower in the line of succession despite the king's affection for her mother. After listening to her, Rio thought it would be best to return her to the castle soon, but he still agreed to accompany her to Lastral, though they would first need to return to the capital to borrow a horse cart. On their way back, Ray couldn't help but notice the crowds. They were all abuzz with talk of the black grizzly sighting, and it was the same grizzly that Rio had defeated. Soon, people began to recognize Rio and called him the failed Sword Saint who had been cast out of his home, which angered Ray. Unfazed by this, Rio told her to ignore them since it would be their turn soon, but a man suddenly called out to him. When Rio turned to confirm if he was being addressed, the man sneered and said that there was no other worthless failure around. The man then boasted that he and his group were adventurers on an emergency mission and demanded that Rio vacate his spot. Seeing Rio remain unmoved, the man added that they contributed more to society than a failure like him and insisted he move, but the man was called a liar instead. Ray then remarked that the man seemed unfit for an emergency quest given his poor manners, and she even called him a countryside adventurer, which made Rio think things were about to escalate. Infuriated, the men berated Ray and ordered her to stay silent. With no other options, Rio activated his cheat code and applied Attack Up. As the man continued to harass Ray, Rio swiftly approached and struck him, sending the man flying. Seeing this, both Rio and the bystanders were confused, and though Rio had hit him hard, he hadn't expected such a powerful result. But thankfully, the man came back alive. Astonished by this, the other adventurers questioned what Rio had done, so he explained that he had simply applied Attack Up and struck the man, but they didn't believe him. Unfazed, he advised them to leave if they had learned their lesson. Meanwhile, Ray was equally surprised by his strength and commented that he might even surpass his father someday. But Rio replied that he had never seen his father's full power, so he doubted that he could exceed the Sword Saint's skill. However, he couldn't ignore the potential of his mysterious cheat code management skill. Just then, his skill board notified him of a new ability that allowed him to see a target's vitality. Thus, this left him wondering if the skill would continue granting him new abilities, which seemed almost too good to be true. Normally, people can only use one skill, with those rare few able to wield multiple skills, and were often considered national treasures and appointed to important positions. Realizing this, he decided to keep quiet until he fully understood his abilities, as he now had 3 skills at his disposal. Noticing his silence, Ray asked if he was alright, to which he assured her it was nothing. Still, she mentioned that he does not need to worry about the Sword Saint's skill, since Dudley, who is an orphan, had a poor reputation. So even if he is strong, his personality is bad. However, this made Rio wonder how she knew so much. Startled by his question, Ray quickly bopped him on the head, which made him confused, but she refused to answer. Meanwhile, at the Macba mansion, Dudley impatiently ordered a servant to hurry with his food. He even asked her how long she will make the Sword Saint's successor wait, so she responded affirmatively, but threw the dish at her again and demanded that she bring it faster. Aside from that, he also reminded her not to forget the banana chocolate sauce he liked. Afterward, the maid couldn't help but compare the cruel Dudley to the humble Rio. She then recalled how on the day Rio was labeled as having a useless skill, she hadn't spoken up, but she could sense his sadness, and if she had known, she would have been standing by Rio's side. With this in mind, she resolved that it wasn't too late and decided that she must find a way to reunite with Rio. As they traveled, Rio asked Ray if Dudley truly behaved that way. Ray confirmed it and explained that Dudley had an unpleasant personality even before gaining his ability, so the people who accompanied him to the church weren't there to support him. In fact, even the other orphans admitted they had prayed for him to receive a weak ability, though that didn't come to pass. Hearing this, Rio found it ironic that an arrogant person like Dudley ended up with the strongest ability. Still, he wondered if his father had anything to say about it, but Ray shook her head, which indicates that his father pretended as if nothing had happened. Disgusted by this, Ray pointed out that as a result, Rio wasn't allowed to be her personal escort, and this role will likely be assigned to Dudley. She then voiced her frustration by saying that she didn't care about abilities as long as she could stay with Rio. After getting hit, Rio then changed the subject and asked about Lastral's small adventurer guild. Upon hearing this, Ray excitedly asked if she could join him as an adventurer, but Rio explained that it would be difficult, given that everyone in Lastral knew that she was royalty, but she insisted that it would be fine since she had registered under an alias. Moreover, she already got along well with the guild master and she could hardly wait to go on adventures with him. However, their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. But suddenly, Ray blurted out a compliment about Rio's scent. Upon realizing this, she quickly apologized to him, but Rio assured her it was nothing, as they'd always been close, so he then decided to investigate the disturbance instead. Upon stepping outside, he overheard people arguing about the bridge being closed, which meant it would take 3 days to reach their destination. So this made Rio ask why the bridge was closed, but the man he addressed first inquired about his identity. After Rio introduced himself, the man revealed himself as Yuya, a rank B adventurer. Yuya then explained that a Class A orc blocked the way across the bridge, so his team was trying to organize a fight, but they didn't have enough people and couldn't request support from Lastral due to the bridge being impassable. After understanding that it's for their safety, the coachman then suggested to Rio to return to the carriage, but Rio announced he would accompany Yuya. Though Yuya reminded him he wasn't the sword saint, Rio reassured him and explained that he had combat experience from rigorous training and could assist as support. Though Yuya accepted it, he still advised Rio to retreat if the fight became too dangerous. With this in mind, Rio thought it was the perfect opportunity to test his third skill, which is visualizing a target's physical strength. As they journeyed, Rio saw injured adventurers along the way and asked if they were also rank B. Yuya then explained that while some were rank B, most were rank A adventurers stationed on the front lines. Upon hearing this, Rio finally understood that only rank A adventurers were sent to fight the monster, while rank B adventurers were supposed to stand guard. But eventually, rank B adventurers would need to replace the A ranks. After that, Yuya then informed him that 3 rank A adventurers were leading the fight, but this giant orc was much larger than usual. However, Yuya assured him there was no need to worry since the battle had been ongoing for a while and should be ending soon. But when they arrived at the scene, they noticed bodies strewn about and questioned why the battle wasn't concluding, as they assumed 3 rank A adventurers would handle it. Rio then spotted the orc up ahead and wondered if this chaotic scene could even be called a battle. After seeing the orc tear an adventurer apart, Yuya commanded Rio to return and report to the guild, but Rio refused to leave him alone. Still, Yuya thought there was little choice, so he insisted Rio to go, but Rio was now unsure what to do even with his cheat code ability, because he is not strong enough. Just then, they heard a girl crying for help because she doesn't want to die. However, this caught the orc's attention and tried to attack the girl. In response, Rio swiftly activated his cheat code attack increase and used the Makba sword-style swift flash. As a result, the orc ended up falling down. After seeing this, they then rushed to aid the injured adventurers. During it, Rio asked Yuya if he was okay, and also apologized for his rash actions. However, Yuya could only ask in astonishment what Rio had just done, but Rio himself was surprised that he managed to do that. Suddenly, the girl finally woke up, but she felt no pain, so she wondered if he had used an elixir. But Rio was busy telling Yuya that they should leave before the orc recovered. However, the orc was already back on his feet. Seeing the orc enraged, Rio told the girl to help her other injured companions while he faced the orc, but she reminded him of the danger in fighting alone. In response, he asked her if she intended to fight with her sword broken. Realizing there was nothing she could do, she instead asked him for the name of the swordsman who had saved her life. So he then told her that his name was Rio Makba, and she immediately recognized who he was. With that, she introduced herself as Kaya and reminded him that regardless of what others said, he was a talented swordsman, so she urged him to survive. As the orc began to rampage again, Rio felt the weight of its presence. After activating his cheat code, he decided to use his new ability, visualize the target's physical strength. To his dismay, he saw the orc's HP was still full, and this made him question Yuya's claim that the battle was in its final stages. Suddenly, his cheat code prompted him to confirm if he wanted to view the accumulated damage on specific parts of the ogre's body, and he agreed. After observing closely, he noticed that only the ogre's right foot had sustained damage, seemingly the only area the adventurers had managed to target. As he wondered why they hadn't aimed elsewhere, the ogre suddenly attacked, but Ryo dodged just in time, but this hit would certainly have been fatal. However, this gave him a chance, so he quickly used the Manga sword style's first hidden technique, the Phoenix Sword, and activated his cheat code to cast the fire magic spell, Prominent Lance. After that, he then urged the others to take the chance to escape. But as he urged them, they asked him instead why they should run. With that, they then tell him the giant orc was already dead, which Ryo initially doubted, but when he turned to check, he was shocked to find it was true. Still, he declared that it was nothing. He then explained that the orc was already weakened by the attacks from the rank A adventurers, so he simply seized the opportunity to finish it off. Still astonished, Yuya asked Ryo how he managed to use such powerful magic that even advanced wizards would struggle to perform. Ryo then began to explain but stopped when he noticed something unusual on the ogre's body. Upon inspection, he found a stone similar to one he had seen in the Black Grizzly, which left him silently pondering its significance. Later that night, he finally returned to the carriage, but Rei unexpectedly threw herself at him in relief, which surprised him with her strength. Still, she expressed how grateful she was for his safe return, and admitted how worried she'd been, to which he thanked her warmly. He then handed her some flowers, and apologized for not having anything more valuable, but he hoped that they would be enough for her forgiveness. However, this gesture reminded her of how he used to give her flowers when they were children, and she assured him that it was okay because it's more than enough. After arriving at Lastral Village, Ryo noticed how quiet it was compared to the bustling capital. But after realizing it was already late, he asked Kaya if they could continue the tour the next day. After she agreed, she then mentioned that she wanted to receive sword lessons from him because of his impressive skill, but he humbly clarified that he still had much to learn. Upon hearing this, Rei quickly stops Kaya and insists that she should be the one to receive instruction, which puzzles Ryo. Seeing this, Kaya reminded Rei to show some respect for her position. Setting that aside, Kaya then told Ryo that she had heard of his struggles to succeed as a sword master and sympathized with how challenging it must have been. But after witnessing his recent battle, she was convinced that he was the kind of swordsman they needed in this new era, to which Rei also agreed with, and added that he was far more honorable than Dudley. Although Ryo thought they might be exaggerating, their words made him happy. Still, it's a fact that his father still chose Dudley as the Silver Sword Master. On the other hand, Kaya continued talking about his father's decision not to choose his own son, and teased Rei not to mess with Ryo, which left him confused. Later, before going to sleep, Rei began to ask if he was listening. In response, Ryo asked if she was only wearing a towel, to which she confirmed, and asked him why he was concerned. So he then reminded her that he is an outcast from the Manga family and she was royalty, so any mistake on her part could affect her future. Undeterred, Rei declared that she didn't care and even hinted that she hoped things could go back to how they were. While he was still surprised by her words, she assured him that she wouldn't give up and said goodnight. After also saying goodnight to her, Ryo found himself unable to sleep afterward. After stepping outside, he reflected on the new abilities he had gained after his battle with the giant orc. As he examined his list of codes, he saw that it was vastly different from before. So he decided to try his new skills and activated a cheat code. Suddenly, he felt dizzy, and his vision began to blur. After that, he was transported to an unfamiliar room. He then heard someone practicing nearby and recognized the figure, but he couldn't remember where he saw him. When he approached him, he tried asking the man if he hadn't noticed his presence, but he was interrupted by another man who exclaimed that the swordsman was full of energy. However, Ryo felt as if he were hallucinating, for this man was none other than Organt, the first king of the kingdom of Arceus and son of Arceus himself. The swordsman then asked Organt if he had once again shirked his public duties, to which he replied that he disliked formalities despite being king. Nevertheless, Organt invited the swordsman named Faluas for a drink, but Faluas declined because it was still daytime. However, Ryo recognized the name Faluas as that of his legendary ancestor and the strongest swordsman since the time of the first king. Suddenly, Faluas inquired about recent developments, and Organt replied that the situation was complicated, so he believed that they had no choice but to entrust the future to the next generation, as the reincarnation spell continued to weigh heavily on them. However, Faluas cautioned that if they placed their trust in the wrong person, it could lead to the world's destruction, so whoever will inherit their power must be truly worthy. In response, Organ also agreed and even asked the goddess if she shared their sentiment. After this exchange, Ryo returned to the present, but he was still feeling dazed and wondering what had just occurred. Suddenly, his cheat code notified him that he had inherited the legendary swordsman's will and asked if he wished to accept it. Though uncertain with what was happening, Ryo accepted it. As a result, he gained access to the origin and the most powerful form of the Manga style, the deep flow technique. To test it, he tried slicing a tree in half. Though he succeeded, he was still processing if he really did that. But after remembering that the deep flow was a legendary technique only the finest swordsman could master, he wondered if Phalios had chosen him as his successor. But his mind was too confused at the moment, so he decided to rest first. Meanwhile, at the Manga mansion, Leon called out to the maid who was also leaving. Knowing this, he was left frustrated because other servants are leaving because of Dudley's action and the distrust towards him is growing too. Still, Dudley was the only hope to preserve the family's ties to royalty, so Leon could only endure the strain. Suddenly, Dudley called him and asked him the name of his biological son. Leon then responded that it was Ryo, prompting Dudley to declare he would never forgive him. Dudley then revealed that the maid named Mary intended to leave with Ryo, even though he thinks that he is stronger than him. But this also left him wondering where Ryo was now. The following morning, Ryo remarked on Ray's poor sleeping habits, and as he tried to wake her, she mumbled about seeing 3 versions of him. Just then, Kaya entered to greet them, but she noticed their awkward posture and quickly apologized, but Ryo clarified that it was nothing. Later as they walked, Kaya suggested that they register as adventurers first, to which he agreed. But this prompted Kaya to encourage him to be less formal with her. So he then replied that it was challenging to be informal while working as adventurers, but he'd be more relaxed and private. However, Ray then began asking Ryo to start calling her wife, to which he replied that they should focus on continuing their journey instead. Suddenly, Kaya asked him if something had changed. Seeing him confused, she then explained that he seemed even more formidable than he had the previous day, so she wondered if he had pushed himself fully in battle. But Ryo assured her that wasn't the case. Certainly, he had reached a new level after mastering the deep flow technique, but recognizing this growth easily confirmed why Kaya is deserving to be called an A-ranked adventurer. Nevertheless, Kaya expressed her eagerness to learn about the sword techniques from him, which revealed her determination not to give up. But suddenly, an old lady spotted Ray, so Ray then greeted her in return. After that, the lady reminded Ray not to get caught by the knights this time, which made Ryo realize how well accepted Ray was in this village. Hence, he felt that this place was more welcoming than the capital. However, the gossip was still common because he can overhear the others' whispers about who the princess and Kaya were speaking to. Later, upon arriving at the guild, the receptionist named Elisa immediately recognized both Kaya and Ray. In response, Ray informed her that she was there to register as an adventurer alongside Ryo, but Elisa asked if she was certain and noted that it would mean she'd need to pass an exam, which Ray confirmed. However, this made Ryo inquire if the exam was particularly difficult, but Elisa reassured him that it simply involved a sparring match against adventurers ranked C or higher to prove their skills. But their conversation was interrupted when a man recognized Ryo and referred to him as the one with a defective ability, a label Ryo confirmed without hesitation. But after recognizing the man, Ryo couldn't help but remark on the typical nature of border villages. Still, Ray immediately stood up for him and reprimanded the man for his lack of manners and questioning his sense despite his age. Irritated, the man asked if she wanted him to beat her up, prompting Ryo to wonder if the man even knew who Ray was. Setting that aside, the man noticed that Ryo was about to take the test and proclaimed himself the strongest swordsman, so he challenged Ryo to defeat him. Ryo accepted it, but he still checked with Elisa, who hesitantly confirmed that it was a valid match. Hearing this, Kaya assured Elisa that it will be fine with Ryo. With that, Kaya reminded Ryo to take the duel seriously because the man was indeed a strong swordsman. Before the duel, the man taunted Ryo by saying that he would choose death from Shane if he were a defective son who ended up being replaced by an orphan. Meanwhile, Ryo remained calm and silently observed how the man's loud boasting revealed numerous weaknesses. Still, Ryo wondered if the man was hiding his true ability and began to question how far he could go with his current strength after mastering the deep flow technique. Meanwhile, Kaya couldn't help but comment on how impressive he looked, and even the man admitted that Ryo had good fighting posture. With that, the man urged Ryo to fight without holding back if he truly wanted to die. When Ryo skillfully blocked his sword, the man praised him and encouraged him to take his best descending attack. But Ryo calmly informed him that he didn't need to hold back, which confused the man. As Ryo thought of taking a break, he chose to throw him into the wall. Seeing this, Ryo asked the man what he was doing and reminded him to take the match seriously, or it wouldn't be much of a test. Enraged, the man vowed that Ryo would regret pushing him to unleash his best move. In response, Ryo attacked with a deep flow technique. Using his infinite flash from the underworld, he bypassed the man's defenses in just 4 seconds and struck him from behind. Even so, Ryo still regarded the man as a formidable swordsman and thought that his own skill might pale in comparison. To his surprise, he saw the man lying on the ground, so he asked the man what was wrong. While the man cried out in pain, Kaya congratulated Ryo. She then revealed that this man had actually just recently been promoted to rank C and often harassed newcomers, which she couldn't allow to slide. After knowing this, Ryo realized that his recent attack might have been excessive, but Kaya assured him not to worry, as the man's determination ability allowed him to survive powerful attacks up to 5 times a day without fatal harm. After Ryo was relieved, the man began reprimanding him and even threatened him, so Rei stepped in and ordered the man to admit his defeat, but he didn't recognize her. So Rei revealed herself as the second princess and reminded him of the words he'd spoken to her before. After realizing her identity, the man quickly apologized to both her and Ryo, but Ryo just simply asked for the result of the test, so the man declared that he had passed with ease. Hearing this, the girls praised Ryo now that he was an adventurer. With this in mind, he thought that this accomplishment was not bad at all, even though he hadn't become a sword master. After that, Ryo registration as an adventurer was finally completed, but Elisa apologized to him that she had to start him at rank E even though she believed his abilities matched those at rank S. In response, Ryo reassured her not to worry because his rank wasn't solely based on combat power. Besides, this marked the beginning of his life as an adventurer. With that being said, he then asked if she could purchase materials, to which she agreed. So he handed over the fangs, claws, and hide from the black grizzly, along with materials from the giant oak. However, Elisa said she couldn't handle such valuable items alone and asked him to wait. Shortly after, someone appeared to confirm what Elisa said, and it's Alto, the guild master of Lastral Village. Upon inspecting the materials, Alto was astonished and asked Ryo for his name. After Ryo introduced himself as Ryo Makba, it confirmed Alto's suspicion that he was the one from years ago. Alto then revealed that they had met over a decade ago. Ryo then recalled that Alto was once renowned as the best healer and his father Leon frequently visited him, but Alto had suddenly left the capital and he never expected to find him here. Suddenly, Alto mentioned that he had heard about Ryo's story and was surprised that Leon abandoned his own son, but Ryo replied that it was all in the past. Besides, he was now surrounded by kind people despite not becoming a sword master. Seeing that Ryo had found contentment in his current life, Ryo looked favorably upon Alto, so he then offered to forge a sword using the rare materials and guaranteeing top quality as he is the guild master. Though they were surprised, Ryo agreed, so Alto then set to work immediately. While the sword was being made, Ryo suggested they explore the village because they hadn't had the chance the previous day. But since Kaya had left on an emergency request, Rei would be his guide. Hence, Rei took him to the town's symbolic fountain. After that, she took him to Restar restaurant that is known for its intimidating owner. However, Ryo couldn't help but notice the attention they were attracting due to the second princess guiding him. Sensing this, Rei asked if he was uncomfortable, and he replied that he wasn't. So she then excitedly remarked that it felt like a date, which made him remind her to not say shocking statements. Still, she simply took his hand, and this made him think that this isn't bad for once in a while. As they continued exploring, the villagers began inviting Ryo to return to their shops and were glad for his visit. Noticing how he was warmly welcomed, he couldn't help but compare the village's kindness to the colder atmosphere of the capital. But as he reflected that this was the first time he truly felt the warmth of others since acquiring his abilities, he noticed Ri enjoying herself by the fountain. Seeing this, he began to remember that they used to do this. Hence, he then thanked her for the enjoyable day, which made her happy. Still, she reminded him that skill wasn't everything, and that she didn't care if he was the sword master or not. Touched by this, Ryo thanked her once more. Later at the guild, Ryo finally received the sword that Alto called the legendary sword Leverity. Seeing its exceptional quality, Ryo was genuinely impressed by Alto's skill as he had crafted this masterpiece in such a short time. As Ryo wielded it, Rei couldn't hide her amazement, and Alto added that the sword suited him perfectly. With that being said, Alto went on to explain that the Makba and his own family shared a long history together because the Makba lineage produced sword masters, while his lineage was known as sword name masters. However, Leon became lost over time and was consumed by power and glory that he forgot what he truly needed to protect. After mentioning this, Alto apologized, but Ryo reassured him that he didn't mind. Encouraged, Alto remarked that Ryo bore a striking resemblance to the first sword master from the legends, so he invited Ryo to return if he ever acquired more quality materials and promised to forge a special sword for the true sword master. Though slightly intimidated, Ryo gladly accepted the offer. Just then, Alto was informed of a problem. When he asked about it, Elisa explained that a large number of white wolves had gathered near Lastral village, and while many adventurers from the capital were already on their way, the numbers were still overwhelming. Upon learning this, Alto urgently asked Elisa to request assistance from rank C adventurers or higher and to guide the villagers to safety. He also called Ryo over, and despite his current rank E, he asked if he could count on him for this crisis. Although white wolves were typically rank D, their strength increased significantly in large numbers. Hence, Ryo accepted it and promised to do his best. Aside from him, Ryo also volunteered and Alto allowed it while also encouraging Ryo to surpass the previous generation and become the true sword master. When they arrived, Ryo couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of wolves. Just like him, the other adventurers shared his concern. Suddenly, Ryo was called by Yuya, who was glad to see him and expressed relief that his presence boosted his own courage. But Ryo noticed his wounds, so Ryo asked Ri to use her magic. Curious by her, Yuya asked who she was since she seemed familiar, but Ray brushed it off as his imagination. Meanwhile, Ryo estimated that there were over 100 wolves, while only about 20 adventurers were present. He also observed that the wolves' howls amplified each other's strength and provided support to their weaker pack members. After recognizing that they would lose if this continued, he resolved to fight seriously. Using resistance visualization to assess the wolves' condition, he decided to start by eliminating the weaker ones and aiming to disrupt their coordination. With that, he swiftly employed his deep flow style, truly swift strike. After that, he began to think that if they could target wolves on the brink of death, they could manage the horde more effectively. However, he was surprised to see that the wolves had stopped moving. Seeing this, he then wondered if the sword he wielded could freeze all nearby monsters, and it seems that almost all the wolves have been annihilated. While he marveled at this, both Yuya and Rei stood stunned by the scene. Noticing their reactions, he explained he might have gone a bit overboard, but they responded that a bit was an understatement. Nevertheless, Yuya now realized just how powerful Ryo was, and Ri agreed. Suddenly, a man began asking if Ryo was indeed Ryo Makba. When Ryo confirmed, the man mentioned that his father Leon had lamented about his useless son. Thus, he asked if Ryo was now trying to redeem his family's honor, but then suggested that Ryo was trying to deceive him and accused him of some wrongdoing. Before Ryo could respond, Yuya told the man named Yujiz to stop. Yuya also added that although Ryo's strength was impressive, there was no need for Yujiz to bow in gratitude. But Yujiz called him out for being rank BM and claiming that he is the one who had defeated the wolves and not Ryo. Hearing this, Ryo realized that Yujiz was just trying to steal credit, but he didn't care. However, he suddenly noticed another pack of white wolves approaching. Puzzled by this, he recalled how the black grizzly and giant orc had appeared unexpectedly before. As he thought that something seemed off, he noticed that there was something unusual about the nearby trees. While Ryo assessed the situation, Yujiz questioned why there are still survivors. Nevertheless, he still mocked Ryo and boasted that he alone would defeat the wolves. But Ryo also agreed to let him do it, and asked Ri to accompany him elsewhere instead. Seeing this, Yujiz called Ryo a coward for running away. As they left, Ri asked Ryo what was wrong, so he then explained that he suspected that he might know the mystery behind the unusual appearances of these monsters. After all, he's been fighting many of them in a short period, and many were high-level threats, which seemed unnatural. Just then, Yuya joined them because he was curious as to why Ryo had left. With that being said, Ryo then activated his original technique, Formless Breath, to sense any hidden presence they might be pursuing. After locating their target, he then used his Deep Flow style's True Swift Slash on the target. Initially, Rei was confused by his actions, but both she and Yuya were shocked when a hidden staircase appeared on the ground.